Welcome to Finding the Right Advisor for You and Your Wealth. My name is Todd Goldman, and I'll be your guide in this video series as we explore how the financial service industry is structured, your options as a consumer of these services, and a process to help you focus on what's most important to you. I've been working in the financial services industry since 2004 after starting my career as a mechanical engineer, followed by a decade working in television as a creative executive. Now, when I entered the wealth management industry, honestly, I had a very limited understanding of how it all worked. But since then, I've held positions at several different types of financial companies and worked with colleagues that have come from all over the industry. And through this experience, I've developed a much clearer perspective on the industry and can see how the average person might be overwhelmed by the task of finding someone to help them manage their wealth. And with this in mind, I thought I'd share my perspective as a one-time outsider, now insider, along with a 7-step process that you can follow to help you find the advisor that's most suited for your situation. I'm not here to tell you what company or person would be the best fit for you, but merely to arm you with the information you need to make the best decision for yourself. Now, with that in mind, let's take a minute to define the term advisor, well, at least as how we'll be using it during this video series. So I defined an advisor as someone getting paid by you, directly or indirectly, to provide advice or services regarding your money. Now, this is a business relationship. That's one thing to keep in mind. And the other thing that I really like to point out, and this is really the most important thing to keep in mind, is that this relationship involves your money. And of course, the question then becomes like, well, beyond the obvious, why is that important or why is that relevant? And that, to address that point, I want to share a little bit of data that comes from a research project that was done in 2019 by a group of neuroscientists. They had set out to determine whether humans use the same or a different part of the brain to process both the social and material rewards that might come to you. So these are the results. And it's really no surprise to find out that gaining and losing money activates the exact same pleasure and pain centers in the brain as does falling in love and having your heart broken. Okay, so why is that? Well, mainly because for most of us, money and wealth represent safety, security, stability, self-worth, and your potential, which, if you think about it, are really the same rewards we get from being part of a larger social unit, which really kind of starts with, just a romantic partner. Now, these are all, of course, tied to our survival instincts, having evolved from a tribal community. And as such, we can really expect emotion to play a huge part in this process as we seek out a new relationship around our money. So again, not quite the same thing as a romantic relationship, but it's a lot triggering in our brain in a lot of the same fashion. But really, one of the other questions we need to ask before we go too much farther is like, what kind of relationship are we looking for? Now, I define within the industry, I break them down into two broad categories, which sound a little familiar if you've done any sort of dating, but you've got your long-term relationships and your short-term relationships. These are just a few of the job titles that might fall under the two different categories. But broadly speaking, a long-term relationship is going to be a multi-year process or experience with the advisor. Think of this as a family counselor, someone that's going to be providing guidance around wealth for a long period of time. Depending on your goals, it may be someone that you want to work with for decades. The firm I work for is 30 years old, very family oriented. I've got clients that have been founding members of the firm, been there since day one. And I think there's a lot of benefit to be had from that approach. It's not for everyone, but if that is your goal, then you'll want to seek out what I'll term the long-term relationship. Now, there might be you might be in a different circumstance where what you're going through and kind of the catalyst for sparking your need or search for an advisor is more finite in nature. Maybe it's just a single transaction that you're going through, the purchase of a property, sale of a property or a business. Maybe you're doing some estate planning and you need an attorney to draft documents, or you're just procuring some life insurance and you just need it just, a short-term experience with that. So a lot depends on what you're looking for. You may already know what it is you're seeking out, but I think I'll be able to provide some guidance along the way if you're kind of on the fence trying to decide whether you need the long-term relationship or the short-term. Now, the process, the 7-step process that I mentioned a while ago, is really kind of most suited for folks that are looking for the long-term relationship. That being said, there's some useful information in that, but if you really are just in need of a short-term relationship, you can just kind of screen out a lot of the categories or criteria that you might want to be looking for and just focus on someone that can kind of get the job done today. So, before we get too deep in the weeds, I do want to share an experience that happened to me many years ago that illustrates a pretty common situation in the world today, at least as it relates to people that are looking to secure financial advisors. So, when I was a young single man back in the day, I'll be charitable and say I was a late bloomer. Okay, I did not have the easiest time meeting women. And coinciding with this, my big celebrity crush at the time was Michelle Pfeiffer, seen here in the lovely mid-'80s film Lady Hawk, which I would highly recommend, except upon recent viewing, it really doesn't hold up that well, but at the time, I loved it. Well, in the midst of this scenario, my father, knowing my lack of game, as it were, was kind enough to come back from a business dinner, and he said, "Hey, I was at this event. This young woman works at this company I'm doing business with. She seems delightful. She looks just like Michelle Pfeiffer. I think you should give her a call. Here's her number." And I'm like, "Okay, well, thanks, Dad. I need all the help I can get." So picked up the phone, called her. Back in the day when you actually called people. Chatted with her briefly on the phone. She seemed nice enough. I said, "Hey, let's just get together. Let's grab dinner." So set the dinner date. The day of, I was walking to it, and it had been a very crazy day. I hadn't had much opportunity to think about the date, aside from where we were going. But as I was walking up to the door, I said, "You know what? All I really know about this woman is that she looks exactly like Michelle Pfeiffer, because that's how she was described to me." And it occurred to me, it's like, I should probably prepare myself in the event she doesn't look like Michelle Pfeiffer. So it's like, well, that's, probably why. So anyways, go up, knock on the door. She opens the door, and whoa, good thing I did that, because she didn't look like Michelle Pfeiffer. Now, it doesn't mean she was unattractive, and really in the end that doesn't matter anyways, but I at least didn't have a look of surprise on my face. It's like, oh, well, that's good. Well, I looked down, and there's a small dog that had come out to greet me, and I said, "Oh, that's fantastic. I love dogs. I've got 2 big dogs at home. We've got something in common. This is great." And she goes, "Oh, I don't like dogs at all. This is my roommate's dog." I'm like, "Okay, don't like dogs. Whatever. That's fine. Not everything. It's not the end of the world." So I go in, she's grabbing her coat or whatnot. I look over on the TV, and there's an episode of Star Trek playing. I'm a huge Star Trek fan at the time, so may have somehow related to the fact I had no game. But anyways, love Star Trek, and I'm going, "Hey, you like Star Trek? I love Star Trek." And she was like, "I hate Star Trek. My roommate's watching this. She loves Star Trek." Well, at that point, I probably should have said, "Hey, how about if I take your roommate out? Because she's the one that likes Star Trek and dogs, and that's kind of like my thing." So I didn't do that, of course. But anyhow, so we go out on the date, and there was no sparks, no magic. It was fine. It was a one and done. But at the end of the event, it occurred to me that I had learned something from this experience. And what had I learned? Well, I learned that, frankly, it really pays to be specific when you're asking for an introduction. Because, frankly, if the person that had known me my entire life, my father, didn't know exactly what it was that I was looking for, well, how can I expect anybody else to get it right? It was really up to me to articulate what it was that I was seeking. So, from this experience, just to confirm my nerdness, I created a blind date checklist. I had, I believe, 10 different items on there. criteria that I wanted my friends and family to be able to certify that the person met at least 5 of the 10 before they fixed me up with someone. So I printed it out, I laminated it, I handed it out to people. It was wallet size. It was very convenient. Anyhow, what I'm going to recommend to you is a version of that. Only it's focused on wealth management, or rather finding advisors, financial advisors for you. So anyways, now for purposes of illustrating a point, I'm going to kind of expand my real life experience into an analogy, again, to kind of focus on another part of the issue at hand. Okay, so let's imagine in an alternate universe, I actually did meet Michelle Pfeiffer and we fell madly in love. Now, because she's an actress and she lives in Los Angeles and I at the time lived in Maryland, I would have to move in with her. Now, on the surface of things, that might seem like a really good idea. I could possibly live in what would hopefully be a very comfortable home. Maybe this one, probably not, but you get the idea. But what if, for whatever reason, I did not feel comfortable in this house? Maybe it was too big, cavernous, or maybe it was actually too small, right, for whatever reason. Or it could have been too noisy, or bad internet, or maybe it was in a bad neighborhood, or a really good neighborhood, but I didn't feel comfortable living in it. Or perhaps even worse, like all of Los Angeles could have been too smoggy, too much traffic, or excessive sunlight. Any number of things could have been wrong with the hypothetical me in this situation. Well, the relationship as it is may not have necessarily been doomed, but for sure the hypothetical me would have had to compromise on many of the things that I needed to be happy, my physical needs within the confines of the home. So this leads to our next revelation, which is it's not just about the person, the house is important too. And in this understanding, what we're talking about, of course, the advisor that you'll be working with is the Michelle Pfeiffer, and the company that they work for is the house. So we want to make sure that we're evaluating all aspects of the relationship that you are looking to get involved with. Now, why don't we just quickly take a look at, and this is kind of the structure of things, using the analogy of romance, at least as it pertains to long-term dating purposes. Traditionally, this is kind of the structure of how things go. And it's not unlike how things are done in the investment world. But basically you say, hey, I want to meet someone. All right, that's the first thing people usually say. Then you would say, hey, let me ask some of my friends. Hey, you know anybody? Can you fix me up? And then you'll get introduced to somebody, and then you're probably going to meet with a few. You go out on dates. And, again, if you're really committed to finding a long-term relationship, someone to settle down with, in the end, you're going to go with your gut. You're going to go with, whoever you feel most comfortable with. Hopefully there's some sparks or something along those lines. Well, the question becomes, what is missing from this process, right? And that would be, you want some details, right? You don't just walk out and say, hey, I'm looking to meet another human being. You know anybody? That's not how you go through the process, right? You're going to say what's important to you. Is it a gender, age, range, interests? Do they have any personality traits, religious background, physical characteristics, cultural? I mentioned that already. What about financial stability, things of that nature? Do they want to start a family? Where do they want to live? There's a lot of factors that we kind of already know about when we're, again, screening for, looking for a romantic partner. But then the question becomes like, which is the most likely positive outcome? Do we say, please introduce me to another single person? No. Or do we say, hey, please introduce me to a woman between the ages of 30 and 40 that likes dogs and children, has a career, and likes the outdoors? That's a pretty decent ask, right? But you could be even more specific. You could say, hey, please introduce me to a man between the ages of 45 and 60 that's creative, enjoys reading, has nice eyes, and shares my political views. He should live within 1 hour drive of me, own his home, and get along with his kids and ex-wife if he has any. Okay. Again, that's a really nice, well thought out situation or ask that you're looking to have met. Hopefully it's not too restrictive. I mean, there are folks out there And if you throw a wide enough net with that level of specificity, then hopefully you can land what you're looking for. But either way, there's a benefit to defining what it is that's important to you, and that is kind of the goal. And as I mentioned, what we'd like to do is to treat your search for an advisor, which with as much intention and focus as you would put into finding a life partner, okay, or even someone with whom you're just having a summer fling with, right? The challenge is that this is easier said than done, and there's a couple of reasons for that, right? Because it's easier to know what your options are in the dating world than in the financial services world. And the reasons for that are primarily because, one, the industry is confusing. Two, your options are very unclear. There's a lack of clear differentiation between the different service providers. There's a ton of jargon, and there's a little bit of a misunderstanding about what the relationship looks like to begin with. So these are the problems, challenges that I'm looking to solve with the videos. If I can provide a little more clarity around the industry and the firms that provide services within it, as well as the jargon, I think you'll be a much better informed consumer and be able to execute a much cleaner search for an advisor. Before we get too much farther, though, I want to just quickly talk about item number 5, which is the misunderstanding about the relationship. We need to reframe the idea of what a relationship with an advisor is, and this I alluded to earlier. The general concept is it's you and an advisor, the human being. You say, hey, I need somebody. Your CPA goes and introduces you to a guy, Bill, and you meet with Bill, and it's like, oh yeah, he seems like a great guy. And you think that that's your professional relationship with the advisor. But in reality, it's not a two-party relationship. It's a three-party relationship. It is, in fact, you, the advisor, and the company. Right? This is using my analogy. It's Michelle Pfeiffer and her house. Okay. And this is significant for a number of reasons. And this, again, is probably more relevant for the long-term relationship folks, if that's what you're looking for. But there are scenarios where the advisor would leave the company that they work for or work with. In which case, if you have a tighter relationship with the advisor, then you're forced to move, right? The advisor is going to leave the old firm and join a new company. So again, your accounts would all have to transition and so forth. It's disruptive. It's not the end of the world, but it is something to keep in mind and something that does happen in the course of the industry. The other scenario that sometimes occurs is what I call the divorce, which is the advisor leaves the firm, but your relationship is more with the firm it's closer with the firm than with the advisor. In which case, when the advisor leaves, the company is going to hire someone new to take their place, and you're going to get a new advisor to work with. Again, not the end of the world if so long as your priorities are you're getting more value or benefit from working with the firm than with the individual advisor. It may be a kind of a non-event, but just something to keep in mind as you're going through the process and determining what type of company to work that you might want to work with, or what type of advisor. So in summary, I'd like to say that hiring an advisor is like marrying someone and moving into their house. So in a perfect world, make sure the person's a good fit, make sure the house is a good fit, because divorce is messy and moving is messy. So if you can avoid the mess, all the better. But if we do the work on upfront before we even start dating, then I think we'll position ourselves for a better outcome on the back end. Okay, so the 7-step process that I had mentioned earlier. So this is kind of the evolution of the idea. So at its core, like I said, most people seek out an advisor if they're looking to make a change or hire an advisor for the first time. They kind of do the same thing that they do with dating. There's some sort of a catalyst, something that says, hey, I need help with something. They go out and start asking for referrals. They go talk to their CPA, their coworkers, family members, or you just go to the internet and do your searches there. Then you're going to get some introductions, and you're going to start setting up meetings. you'll interview them or they'll interview you. And then in the end, you're going to go with your gut. Exact same way that you decide who to settle down with for life. It's, who makes you feel, who you feel is trustworthy, who makes you, you have a degree of confidence and just like, it's a good fit. I'm going to go with them. Well, what I'm recommending, again, recognizing that there are different components to the relationship as far as the individual qualities and characteristics that you can look for, as well as capabilities and features of the companies that the advisors work for. We can pre-screen for those things a little bit, right? So what I'm recommending is adding a couple more steps to the process. So we'll add steps 2 and 3 here, which basically do that upfront work using the prefrontal cortex as much as possible before you start the dating process. So that by the time you get to well, first of all, when you start asking for referrals, you're more specific. Hopefully you'll get better matches. And you'll be talking to different individuals, but they'll be similar in many regards, not the least of which may be the type of company that they work for. Right? So it's when you're doing your comparisons after you do the interviews, it's an apples to apples comparison, or at least an apples to oranges comparison, not an apples to, Ferraris, right? Something completely off the completely different category. So once you go through that process, in the end, you're going to go with your gut, because we always do. That's how we make our decisions as human beings. But you've pre-screened on the front end. You're evaluating from similar group of individuals that have the qualities or characteristics that you have identified as most highest priority for you. That's it. That's kind of the whole process that we're going to go through. So the rest of the journey is going to look a lot like this. There should be about 8 videos in the series, and the bulk of them will focus on the various 7 steps in the advisor selection process. But we'll start next episode with an industry overview, basically taking a look at the multi-decade evolution of the financial services industry to provide some context and perhaps a better understanding of how the different companies fit together, what they focus on, and give you a better sense of perhaps some of the brand names that you've heard of over the years, get a sense of what type of companies they are and what they might be able to do for you. All right. Well, thank you for tuning in. I do appreciate you taking the time. If you found this information helpful, please like and subscribe and spread the word amongst your friends, families, colleagues, really anyone that you know that you think might benefit from hearing this information. My goal really is just to get the word out. As I mentioned, I've not seen anything like this anywhere in the world that kind of just explains the industry overall and gives this extra level of guidance for people conducting a search. If you are looking for additional content and information, please visit the website, which is www.right-advisor.com. I've got PDFs of this document as well as links to the other videos in the series. If you need help with your search or have a specific question that you would like me to answer, I'm happy to do so. I can be emailed at todd@right-advisor.com. That's it for now. As I mentioned, next episode we'll be getting an overview of the financial services industry, as well as some insight into how different companies operate. I do hope you'll join me. In the meantime, I wish you all the best. Farewell, good fortune, and we'll see you soon.